Hi, gang. Really enjoyed the continuing interaction with you. Your written work is first rate. Our discussions in class are very enjoyable for me. Hopefully they are for you. The one thing I remind you every time, and I'll do it on this YouTube also, please keep me looking at the clock. I feel guilty when I bleed over into your time. You're very patient, and you're certainly very much involved in what it is that we're trying to do. So I do appreciate that, but I still think, you've worked a full day and you have every right to get your own time back. So enough of that. Week 4. What are we doing in week 4? Well, in week 4, we're looking at two things. We're largely looking at the role that the largest agency that we're going to deal with in the course has in terms of its action and policy, and that's the federal government. Now, obviously, we're all about education. We could do this with any federal agency. We could do this with the federalist relationship between state and the Fed. Our concern is the education as it is driven by the federal government. And there are two concepts we need to be aware of. Neither of them is new per se. They re-entered the scene about 4 or 5 years ago. And the first one is known as accountability. And the point they're trying to make with accountability is relatively simple. It says you are the custodians of the public weal. You are the custodians of federal dollars. And they come from taxes. And we consider ourselves to be, though frankly we're not, overly taxed. When you look at how some of the other folks are paying taxes in Europe and how some of the taxes are being paid in places, for example, like Japan, we're doing pretty well. So the point is, we are using federal dollars and tax money. Therefore, it's important that we be accountable and that those dollars be spent in the most efficient way possible. So that's accountability. The other one is even more important. That's a little newer. I happen to be very much a believer in it. It's called transparency. I always remember when we do that, a gentleman that I had in class a long time ago who was a scholar of the presidency of Woodrow Wilson. And he remembered something that Wilson took to Versailles with him in 1919. And that was that the goal was open covenants, openly arrived at. There had been too much prior to World War I that was done in smoke-filled rooms behind the scenes. So to make a long story short, he wanted it done out in the open. And the term that best describes that, of course, is transparency. And I think when it comes to forming policy, developing policy, clearly, that's what we're looking for, to be as transparent as possible. We want the stakeholders, and we're very much comfortable with that word based on our activities of the last 3 weeks. Now, the stakeholders have a great deal invested, and they want to be sure that there is as equitable a use of the tax dollar and of the political power as possible. So those are the two key words. One of the things you remember, at least I think you do, is we've had several very long readings. In fact, I sent you a third one, which we didn't do in class 3. We'll probably do a little bit of it in class 4. And that, again, focuses on these rankings and the way in which policy influences them. But now you begin to understand why it is that I chose not to use a textbook, because there are more of these coming. They're good. My recommendation to you is, as you get ready to prepare to write your comps, whether you're urban ed, higher ed, whatever you may be, please keep a notebook. Those things will come in very, very handy. I try not to use anything that's more than 3 years old. A lot of the textbooks you read are twice and 3 times that age. And so you should be able to write very precise, focused, up-to-date comps using some of these materials. And believe me, you will want to include something in your comps on policy formation because it influences nearly everything that we do. Okay, we're not going to try to go paragraph by paragraph with that stuff. It's far too long. Every one of them has an executive summary. And I want to look at those. I want to take just a little tiny look at the bibliographies to see things that I think you ought to be aware of, ought to maintain, versus the things that you could say, well, that's fine, but it's kind of should be put out to pasture right now. So enough of that. Kind of tells you we're still rat-rocking along. We've got some dialogue in the background. I do apologize for that. We do this in a quasi-public environment. Okay, the next thing, remember, for class 4, you should be bringing your second of 4 executive syntheses documents. Those that I have received and given back, you are excellent. You fully understand the purpose of that assignment and how it should be developed, and I'm very, very happy with that. It's always worked well for me. Let's take a look for a moment then, since I'd like to get those. Ideally, and I'm going to hark back after saying I'm leaving. One of the things I prefer, only because you get more instantaneous feedback, and most of you word process them anyway, word process them and attach them to an email. That way what I can do is have my comments in your hands before class starts. And if something, and there have been several, and Dr. Spicer finally got back to me, I guess the email travels more slowly, either to Florida or wherever else she may be, on the thing that she did, so I'll be able to share some thoughts. I like to do that, and if you have it back, then it's no surprise when I bring it up, and you can sort of lead us through some of this dialogue. Okay, a couple things we ought to talk about. In terms of the PowerPoint slides, a couple things were new, one I very much like. I think it's important that you think about it. There was a phrase they use called data dumps, and this is a passive-aggressive response to people who are not necessarily happy with the rate of change in society today. So what do? They literally bury you in information. I prefer to say bury you in BS, but that's not very professional, so pretend I didn't say that. Let me give you a couple examples. Virtually every institution that you work for has involvement. I shouldn't say it that way. Every institution, if you work for a college or university, has it, and if you are a student at one, you have it. That's the National Study Student Engagement. It's called NSSE for people who are in the four-year college business, which is most of you. Its twin, younger sibling, if you prefer, is called CESI, Community College Study. And basically that data can be very useful. I wasn't even aware they were doing it. We were one of the first schools to be involved, that is Hagerstown, when I was there. And I read about it, and I went to see our IR deputy director, and she said, oh yeah, we've had it for 2 years. And I said, where is it? She said, oh, it's over there on the shelf. It's a big, thick notebook. Okay. Well, what do you do with it? Oh, we put it up there. It's a compliance document. There's another new phrase for you. Compliance document. It means you got a piece of paper in a pigeonhole, and you're probably not going to pay any attention to it. I said, well, can I look at it? She said, sure. Why would you want to? I said, because they're telling us some things that we ought to know in terms of being more responsive to our stakeholders, particularly to our students. She said, okay. And then I tried to get the word out. Not a whole lot of my colleagues were very impressed with it, but it's still data dumping. And the other classic example of data dumping is the idea of a ton of data on the budget. And if you've got to be very, very careful, because there will be things hidden in there, hoping that you will read over them if you have any say in what is approved and moved to the next level in budget building. And so be careful of data dumps. They may or may not be your best friends. Okay, one other thing I wanted to talk about, which I think has merit, and that is the gentleman whose essay, it's about a fairly short essay, that ends the unit, Udoff. Udoff is a very controversial guy. He was involved in politics in the state of California, fairly successfully. Decided he would take on a very difficult job, president of the University of California, at a time when there started to be real serious financial problems in the state. You might well say the two states are bellwethers for how things are going financially in this country, and they're on opposite coasts. New York is one, and California is the other. And lately, California has been a better predictor. They tend to be, if you don't like, I don't think it's an accurate term, but if you don't like anything that may touch on or even slightly smack of a social system as opposed to a democratic or a Republican system, and those Democratic and Republicans are used in the political science sense of the word, but a socialism system, which we've never had, not when you look at France, Spain, England, other places. But the bottom line is there, and what he provides you with is some insight of what he's had to wrestle with since the recession pretty much kicked off and is deeper. I was listening to the radio coming to the place where I make these YouTubes, and I heard about the fourth city in California that is moving to declare bankruptcy. So his model is to try to create policy that will prevent some of this from happening and move us into realistically grappling with that which has to be fixed. And we'll talk a good bit about that. I continue to enjoy what we're doing. Hopefully you do. And I will see your smiling faces next Monday.